The meeting of the Committee on Student Achievement and School Innovation of the Board of School Directors will please come to order. Will Secretary please call the roll?
Director Gokul Gandhi.
Present.
Director Leonard.
Present.
Director O'Halloran.
Here.
And Chair Simpson.
Present.
That's 4 members present.
The Chair will now ask the Secretary to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. The Chair invites any members of the audience who wish to participate to do so and asks that those who do not wish to participate please remain silent during.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This meeting is being conducted in person from the Central Services Building. This meeting is also being broadcast via live stream on the MPS website and on the MPS YouTube stream, the links to which may be found on the MPS website on the broadcast page. Before we begin tonight's meeting, we have a short announcement regarding interpretation services for the Spanish-speaking members of our audience.
Buenas tardes y bienvenidos a la Junta Escolar de las Escuelas Públicas de Milwaukee. Si desea escuchar esta reunión en español, por favor llame al 312-626-6799. Nuevamente, 312-626-6799. E introduzca el número de reunión 608-130-5362. Nuevamente, el número de reunión es 608-130-5362. Gracias.
Thank you. For each of our items of business, we will hold a discussion and public hearing. If you wish to speak, please fill out a speaker's slip and bring it to our secretary, Ms. Koala. Virtual speakers are asked to remain on the platform until you are called upon. After speaking, virtual speakers may follow the rest of the meeting using the broadcast information previously mentioned. When you are called upon to speak, please state your name and spell your last name for the record. For the sake of fairness and to give everyone a chance to speak, the Chair reserves the right to limit the length of time allowed to any one speaker. Written testimony will be accepted for transmittal to the Board. Send this testimony to the Office of Board Governance, P.O. Box 2181, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53201-2181, or fax to 414-475-8071, or email it to governance@milwaukee.k12.wi.us. Just as a reminder, Robert's Rules of Order dictates that all comments should be directed to the chair of the committee. Also, any questions or requests, including those from the public, committee members, or the administration, are to be directed toward the chair, who will determine the most efficient way to address them. For the safety of all and to ensure the good order of the meeting, harassment or intimidation tactics of any kind will not be tolerated. Anyone who engages in such harassing or intimidating words or actions will immediately be asked to cease. If such behavior continues, a recess will be called and the offending parties will be removed from the meeting. Anyone ejected from the meeting may continue to listen to the meeting or access the agenda items online. However, the individual will not be allowed to rejoin the meeting. Also, no one other than members of the board, designated staff, and those who have been invited to present or participate in items of business will be allowed on stage before, during, or after meetings of the board and its committees. Finally, for our listening audience, if you wish to access this evening's agenda items and attachments online, you may do so by visiting the meetings, agendas, and minutes page of the MPS website. Now let's begin. Madam Secretary, item 1.
Item 1 is a report with possible action on the Deaf and Hard of Hearing Task Force. This is an informational item. Although it has been noticed for possible action, no action is required.
Would administration please present this item?
Chair Simpson, members of the committee, Eduardo Galvan, Acting Superintendent.
This evening, I have with me Dr. Travis Pinter and Linda Lou Fox-Wheeler to share with you an update on the progress of the Deaf and Hard of Hearing Task Force. We will also be happy to ask any questions you have following the presentation. Thank you. Travis.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair Simpson, members of the committee, Travis Pinter, Senior Director of Specialized Services. It's a pleasure to be able to share an update on the DHH Task Force with you tonight. I'm joined by one of the co-chairs of the task force, Linda Lou Fox-Wheeler, who will introduce herself a bit later in the presentation. Marcy Dicker, the other co-chair of the committee, has been instrumental in our progress, but unfortunately could not join us this evening. We begin with the district's 5 priorities for success. The work of the task force will ultimately impact 3 of the 5 priorities in particular: improving our district and school culture, ensuring fiscal responsibility and transparency, and strengthening communication and collaboration. So let me start with a brief reminder of how we got here. The resolution to form a task force brought forward by Directors Peterson and Herndon passed in April of 2023. Meetings of the full task force have taken place from August of last year through May of this year, every 6 weeks. In addition, leadership meetings that include the co-chairs and me currently take place on a biweekly basis. The purpose of those meetings is to plan for upcoming large group meetings and ensure that the work remains focused on the specifics of the resolution. We spoke during our March update about the 2 goals or phases of the committee, as well as the corresponding subcommittees tasked with the work. Linda Lou Fox-Wheeler will now provide a brief overview.
Chair Simpson and members of the community, I'm Linda Lou Fox-Wheeler. I am an MPS teacher and co-chair for the DHH Task Force. This board resolution called for action related to 2 goals that we conceived of as occurring in 2 phases. The first phase involves surveying the key stakeholders on the strengths and weaknesses of the current design and the efficiency of the current program locations. Phase 1 also includes conducting a thorough review of the MPS DHH program and other programs around Wisconsin and the country. We want to be able to analyze the current trends in deaf education research. The second phase involves development and recommendations for the board. During this phase, the task force will utilize what it has learned from phase 1 to consider the possibilities of procedure and location changes for its DHH program, as well as the financial impact and the impact to staff. That would be including certification requirements. Phase 2 also includes a review of the assessment and the placement process currently utilized by MPS. The progress from subcommittees aligned to these goals has been slow, and that's for a couple of reasons. First, creating a survey and collecting information from various stakeholders requires a lot of work. Secondly, the participation has slowed now that summer is approaching. The MPS research team has assisted in getting our survey in Qualtrics. So our committee has contributed and done a lot of time and effort in making a video with links that are translated into American Sign Language. So that has taken a lot of time as well. We just want to make sure that everybody has equal access. So now I will hand it over to Dr. Pinter. He will explain where that leaves us as we go into the summer.
Chair Simpson, members of the committee, Travis Pinter, Senior Director of Specialized Services. The good news is that Phase 1 is nearly complete. The surveys were distributed through Qualtrics on May 28th and went out to the parents of current and former DHH students going back 4 years, MPS teachers and interpreters, relevant university staff, speech and language pathologists, paras, audiologists, and psychologists and social workers who work with our DHH population. We decided to send it out a second time to solicit more feedback, and we just recently did so we're hoping to get those results soon. With an eye on fall, we will be resuming the full meetings in September. By that time, we should have survey results and analysis and more program information that is still coming in. We would then be able to shift to Phase 2 and considering recommendations based on the information at hand. Thank you for your time. We're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you for that presentation. And slow isn't always a bad thing. There are many things to consider with this task force and lots of experiences and strong feelings on all sides. So taking it slow and being thorough is a good thing. Do committee members wish to make comments or ask questions? Director Leonard?
So I'm glad you explained why it was taking so long, because it's been a year. So I am concerned about that, but when I think about what you have to convert everything into, I do understand that. Out of curiosity, from the research that you've done so far, do we have paperwork, something that we can actually look at this point in time? Because that's been going on for a year. I'd be curious to see what you have already.
Administration?
Chair Leonard, I'm sorry, Director Leonard, Chair Simpson, members of the committee, Travis Pinter, Senior Director of Specialized Services. That's what we're hoping to provide in September. I don't have anything in writing, but we have gathered some of that information. One of the challenges we found in initially going out to the state is, of course, we're unique in the state, and so it was difficult to compare programming directly, and so we've been reaching out to through our connections through Council of Great City Schools and other connections to other urban districts that would have similar population and demographics. That has been helpful. All of that is sort of being compiled, so it's not ready for presentation, but I do believe we'll have a much clearer view of things in the fall. And I would just add, we agree that it's taken a while, but a reminder that we had over 50 individuals who first signed up, and it was, everyone's of course welcome, but it required that we split the group up into quite a few different groups to try to tackle this. And as those groups have kind of dwindled down, we've had to kind of regroup back into the main group, and hopefully that will help us kind of speed things up.
Follow up?
Oh, we're good. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Gokul Gandhi?
Can you tell me how many people have completed the survey to date?
Administration?
Nationwide research that we've received so far. The information that we've received, we have to kind of look through and analyze first. But May 28th is when we resent it out, and that was the deadline. So we are still looking at getting the results in. So we don't have anything confirmed yet.
Director Gokul Gandhi, Chair Simpson, members of the committee, I would just add that we had something, a number we weren't happy with. It was like between 8 and 10 in the first time. And that's why, and we had it out for the 2 weeks, and it was our timing we felt wasn't great. So there's no harm in leaving it out longer. So we sort of regrouped, and that second send, we're hoping we get a lot more interest in, because we kind of got the word out more. So I don't have an exact number yet, but we didn't have that many the first time through.
Follow up?
Yeah, I think you had close to like 30 to 40 individuals here when we first had the audience filled. And so, if that was just the representation of those who showed up to testify, I'm wondering if it makes sense to even take more time to ensure that you're getting a broad number of at least MPS staff, parents, students who are able to respond to that survey.
Administration?
Director Golgandi, Chair Simpson, members of the committee, we fully agree, and that's the one advantage to this sort of getting this summer right now. Our leadership team is still able to kind of gather this, even though we don't have the full committee meetings back till September. And so we intend to keep putting it out there and getting as much as possible. We're in agreement that an arbitrary deadline of 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever, didn't matter as much as getting as much as possible. So we'll leave it open or continue to put it out there and then look at the numbers we have.
Follow-up?
Thank you.
Director O'Halloran.
Two questions, or one comment and a question. To Director Gokul-Gandhi's point, we did have a number of people testify that evening, and usually there's some sort of speaker slip or some sort of documentation, so I don't know if we still have that, but we may be able to contact them directly if they're not getting the emails or texts that are kind of going out in a mass way. You know, maybe we can engage more directly. And then this is not a question relevant to the task force per se, but during one of the recent meetings, somebody had texted me during the meeting to ask if we could change the, for the YouTube stream to show the speakers that are speaking instead of the green, orange, and red circles. Because they were having difficulty, they didn't ask for interpretation ahead of time. I know it's on the notice, but just wanted to put out that suggestion that may make it more accessible to some folks who are following along online.
Madam Secretary, could you address both
Sure. Chair Simpson,
points?
Director O'Halloran, members. It is our standard to show the speaker on the YouTube broadcast. I think there were a couple of meetings where we had quite a few speakers, so we put the timer up on the screen as a convenience for the audience to be able to monitor their time. But it is the standard to show the person speaking rather than the dots. So we're certainly going back to that.
Okay, thanks.
Madam Secretary, what about, do we have a list of people that would be, or is that information that can be shared, or is that something that is just housed in Office of Board Governance?
Chair Simpson, members, we do keep the speaker slips, so if Dr. Pinter and his team have a need for that list, we can get it to them.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions from members of the board? Madam Secretary, do we have any members of the public who wish to make comments?
There are no speaker requests for this item, Madam Chair.
Thank you. All right, I think that's it then. Thank you very much. Looking forward to the update we will get in the fall. Madam Secretary, next item, please.
The next item is item 2, a report with possible action on the Equity End-of-Year Report, June 2024. This is an informational item. Although it has been noticed for possible action, no action is required.
Would Ed, we're having a little bit of a turnover of people coming and going, so just giving them a minute. And looks like we're just about ready. Would administration please present this item?
Chair Simpson, members of the committee, Eduardo Galvan, Acting Superintendent. Tonight we bring you a year-end report on equitable opportunities and practices in the district. The team here with me, led by Dr. Patricia Ellis, will share this report. We will also be happy to take any questions you have following the presentation. Thank you, Dr. Ellis.
Good evening, Chair Simpson. Good evening, Chair Simpson, members of the committee, and Acting Superintendent, Mr. Galvan. My name is Patricia Ellis, and I serve as the Director for the Department of Equity, Access, and Inclusion. This evening, I, along with Dr. John Hill, Director of College and Career Readiness, Mr. Nathaniel Nate Deans, Director of Black and Latino Male Achievement, Ms. Ebony Lewis, Director of Gender and Identity Inclusion, and Mr. Leon Gross, Director of Restorative Practices, will present the Equity End of Year Report for 2024. This report will highlight student-centered, student voice equity work planned and implemented in collaboration with schools across departments and/or with community partners. All work within the district is aligned to the 5 priorities for success. Our highlights will focus on increased academic achievement and accountability, improve district and school culture, and strengthen communication and collaboration. We will also speak to how the highlights support equity, an equity lens, and culturally responsive practices as defined by Administrative Policy and Procedure 1.06. The highlights being shared this evening include quantitative and/or qualitative supporting data and will cover 5 areas: academics, college and career readiness, social emotional learning, strategies and supports for students, and equity, access, and inclusion opportunities that further promote student voice, student engagement, and student leadership. Our first presenter is Dr. Hill, who will share the academics and college and career readiness highlights. He will be followed by Mr. Nate Deans, who will present social and emotional learning highlights. Next will be Ms. Ebony Lewis, who will present strategies and supports for student highlights. And Ms. Lewis will be followed by Mr. Leon Gross, who will present additional equity, access, and inclusion highlights. I'd also like to add that Resolution 2021R-002, Advancing Equity in MPS, will be covered as a part of Mr. Gross's additional equity, access, and inclusion highlights, and I will provide additional information regarding that particular resolution that focuses in on the student-created equity evaluation tool. At this time, Dr. Hill.
Chair Simpson and members of the committee, John Hill, Director of College and Career Readiness. The expectation is we are always looking at data through an equity lens and making every effort to strive towards greater equity in our work. On this slide and the next, we are highlighting some examples of striving towards greater equity. Outcome data for many of these examples has already been shared in other reports to the board. The Poetry Showcase and the Seal of Biliteracy both utilize culturally responsive practices by leveraging students' lived experiences and learning styles. In both examples, students had voice and choice in their projects. The Seal of Biliteracy was inclusive of any language, and for many students, that was their home language. The continued work around increasing access to music instruction represents equity efforts of the district to ensure students in Milwaukee Public Schools are provided the same exposure and opportunities as students in other districts. Performing solo or in an ensemble empowers students socially, emotionally, and intellectually. Focusing customized professional development opportunities for classroom teachers on reading in the Central Region is an example of providing a specific support based on the needs of the students and staff in that region. From 22-23 school year to the 23-24 school year, we saw increases in the Central Region for students on target in both reading and early literacy, as well as reductions in the percent of students below basic for reading and early literacy in the Central Region. County Collections was selected because it works with a variety of different learning styles and abilities to build a solid foundation of mathematics. The equity focus is to help MPS students be more successful in mathematics to reduce the disparities between state and district assessment results. Assessment results were shared previously with the board and publicly available on WiseDash. The MPS virtual program provides students whose learning style matches the virtual format with the opportunity to continue their education virtually after we return to the traditional in-person instruction model. The Milwaukee Virtual Education Program addresses course availability equity issues. Students are dual enrolled in both their in-person school and in a virtual course. This enables students to accelerate their learning by accessing a course that may not be available at their school. For example, even though a school did not have a teacher with a high school mathematics license, some elementary students were able to take high school algebra for high school credit through MVP. Next slide. Without having an unobtrusive method of identifying students for certain areas, you will see several of the opportunities were provided to all students to ensure not just a select group of students had access. For example, the grade 8 high school fair was provided to all students because there is no obvious way of knowing which grade 8 students have knowledge about all of the high schools in MPS and which students do not. The STEM, Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math Partner Showcase highlights student work that supports the career and technical education goal of increasing students matriculating to non-traditional occupations, such as females in engineering. The STEM fair is another means of engaging students with the same goal of matriculating to a non-traditional occupation from diverse backgrounds, race, ethnicities, and gender in careers in science, mathematics, and engineering through project-based learning. Participation in pre-graduation opportunities such as dual enrollment, internships, youth apprenticeships, and school to work are open to all students across the district to ensure students have access regardless of what school they attend. Both dual enrollment outcome data was shared to the board SASI committee as part of the MCube College Connections report in the fall, while internships, youth apprenticeships, and school to work data was shared previously in the work readiness report to SASI. The ROTC program affords students at Hamilton High School to learn more about the opportunities the military offers as either a career or a means to post-secondary education. This exposure provides students with the knowledge of military in a geographic region that does not have a large military presence. When MPS instituted the personal finance graduation requirement, there were only 12 urban districts in the country that offered personal finance without a state mandate. Secure Futures found that 1 in 4 students nationally have access to a personal finance course, but for African American and Latino students, that number drops to 1 in 14. Providing a personal finance course addresses a significant equity issue, and those results were shared in a report at the May SASI committee meeting. College tours are another example of an opportunity open to all students because we do not want to assume all MPS students are first-generation students and have no previous exposure to college when they are not. For out-of-state tours, we are highlighting historically black college and universities, HBCUs. Students with an interest in an HBCU can go on these tours at little or no cost. The UWM and MATC trips, University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee and Milwaukee Area Technical College, trips are provided by grade level, 9th and 10th grade respectively. State college and university trips are open to students that have an interest in learning more about that specific institution. And finally, directing resources to specific areas is an equity strategy. For example, we send direct communications to families in certain zip codes to encourage registration in Summer Academy, 53206 and 53204. Additionally, Summer Academy provides an additional opportunity for students to recover credits and stay on track for high school graduation. This is critical because it addresses disproportionality in grading with higher failure rates of students of color as compared to their white peers. This time I'll turn it over to Mr. Nate Deans.
Director Simpson, Acting Superintendent Galvan, members of the committee, Nate Deans, Director for the Department of Black and Latino Male Achievement. I'm going to briefly just talk to you about some of the highlights from the social and emotional learning aspect, but in particular also with the Department of Black and Latino Male Achievement. Some of the work that we've been able to do has encompassed a number of initiatives around equitable practices for the district, primarily through looking at our students' voices and advocating for the things that they have shared that they've needed, in particular around social and emotional learning, with the statistics here around all of the number of schools that we were a part of. With our programming, around 220 students participated in the mentor, as we're calling the Mentor Village concept programming. We also had about 15 to 16 schools that had our buddies program in it as well, with our fourth and fifth grade mentoring program, and then 6 schools that participated in our manhood development course, right? And so along with those things, really encapsulating a lot of the work that we were able to do with building relationships with our students, ensuring that they were able to receive pathways, not only to do enrollment opportunities specifically for Black and brown males, but also to opportunities to college campuses as we took them to North Carolina, partnering with the Medical College of Wisconsin around the initiative for I forget the name of it, but a number of different initiatives that we were able to go through, right? And so along with some of these other successful programs as the Success Center, who's also able to do some social and emotional learning and academic supports for their students, with our PBIS program that's been able to really support the number of schools they have with coaching, as well as our mental health and wellness programs throughout the district, not only for our staff that are in need of supports, but for our students as well. And so really putting in that work, really ensuring that our multi-tier systems of support are in place, specifically for our students and our staff. With that, I will move on to Director Ebony Lewis.
I'm going to really ask for the audience to respect whoever has the opportunity to speak at the moment.
Good evening, Chair Simpson and members of the committee. My name is Ebony Lewis, and I am the Director of the Gender and Identity Inclusion Department. And I am here just to speak more about the enrichment of student voice activities, a little bit about what the Gender and Identity Inclusion Department has done, as well as some of the other initiatives here. And so in this department, in our department, we've done a lot around very much the similar multi-tiered, engaging student voice. This year, we enhanced the number of GSAs that we were at to over 50 schools that we are serving with active GSAs, including our Gender Sexuality Alliance cohort, where we are supporting all the advisors that lead a GSA training and our Welcoming Schools training. We've led 30 of those throughout the district. That is a prevention, bias-based prevention program centered around LGBTQ plus inclusion. We then also launched our Girls of Color cohort in 15 schools, where we had schools that identify administrators and staff that lead programming either weekly or bi-weekly for girls of color throughout their school. And so we recognized, in order to scale the work that we were doing, we couldn't just have our coordinator going to 50 schools. So how could we engage and really ensure that student voice is there? And so we went in, we did listening sessions to see what the students wanted. If there was an administrator that said this teacher is who's leading it, but the student said we like this teacher, that's the teacher that we then reached out to see if they, had the availability to lead that space for those girls. We conducted listening sessions throughout the entire year to then see, what was that progress, and at the end of the year, were there any changes made and how those students showed up and the ways that they were received and the safety that they felt. And then from that, we culminated that with our Denim Day event at the end of the year for over 300 participants that came to that at UWM, highlighting Sexual Assault Awareness Month, as we know that is one of the barriers to education here in our system when our students are experiencing these things and then coming into our schools. How are we ensuring that they, one, have the education around those things, but then also have access to resources and support, and then our staff have the education around how to support students who may be coming into the spaces, both girls of color, LGBTQ plus students who are the highest to have reported, sexual assault or rape within the school district. And so those are some of our initiatives. Some of the other things we see are community learning centers who have served over 4,800 students between K-4 and 12th grade at 41 schools. We then have our Passport to Summer Reading program, which piloted in the summer of 2023. Also thinking about our reading program, we had our Open Books partnership where 135 schools throughout the district got LGBTQ plus inclusive books that they were able to put in the libraries to ensure that representation is there. We have over 380 students in grades 6 through 12 representing over 20 schools that participated in our annual fall and spring student leadership summit. And we also in the fall and spring had over 100 students, grades K through 5, that represented 20 schools that participated in the advanced learning camps. So those are just some of the ways that our department, as well as, once again, that multi-tiered approach of different departments within this organization have served our students and really looked at student voice and bringing that into the forefront of what we do. And with that, I am going to pass it over to Director Gross.
Director Simpson, members of the board, Acting Superintendent Garvan, Leon Gross, the Director of the Department of Restorative Practices, and as my colleagues, brothers and sisters in the work have mentioned previously, we too are also dedicated to highlighting how we can build communities of care. And so I would like to take a moment to highlight some of the work that has been done under the umbrella of equity, access, and inclusion. In particular, in my department, the Department of Restorative Practices, again, we've been blessed to be able to have more than 4,750 contacts with students where we have coaches that are in 5 schools and they're placed there 4 days a week. So that work is very powerful when you're looking at boots on the ground and being able to build those relationships as well as sustain community within those respective sites. In addition to that, we have a total of 19 schools that we're supporting, and we have touched, again, 330 students that don't have a coach there 4 days a week, but in some form have either consultation, training, or direct PD. And so, again, a lot of that work that we're doing is really dedicated to building those communities of care where the students themselves know that their voices are lifted, that not only elevated, but they're validated, and that we are bringing a narrative to the schools that really support inclusion and not just inviting them to the dance, but actually asking them for a dance. And I like to use that as a parable because we know sometimes diversity is being invited, but not always being included in the activities. And so that is something that we're dedicated to doing within our department. Additionally, when you look at access for English language learners, again, 75 schools had 95% or higher test participation for students. When we're looking at the spelling bee, again, that was something that was highlighted at events in high school, phenomenal event for grades 3 through 10, where we had over 92 t-shirt designs that were submitted for student recognition, again, highlighting their talents as related to the various grade bands. In addition to that, you're looking at more than 1,000 individuals participating or including themselves in that grand celebration when we're highlighting the opportunity for students to showcase that intellectual ability that they have. And it was viewed by more than 180,000 individuals in Milwaukee County via the media streams of TMJ4 as well as MPS Live streams. And so again, that is something that we want to celebrate because we know that our students have the intellectual capacity and the intellectual celebrations to be recognized in an open forum when they're given an opportunity to showcase that. When we look at student-centered and created evaluation tools, which is a Research 101 pilot, we again have had an opportunity to showcase students where they attended 2 virtual and 1 in-person meeting to learn various research methods, as well as practices in order to develop their research question to evaluate equity in their respective schools. Students engaged in literature reviews to build their background knowledge and compared insights. And so again, when they were finished with these particular projects, they shared this information with their respective schools, which again, I would like to highlight was specific to what's going on in their community and led by students themselves. And so what a great way to empower their voices through the methods of research. So not only are you building that capacity there, but now you're teaching them how to go about business in a way where they're bringing data and other forms of research into a question or a hypothetical situation that they would like to promote as a hypothesis when you're talking about equity. So kudos to those students for that. And again, this was highlighted in 4 high schools who led that work and really touched over 130 students who completed surveys to really talk about and share information that was specific to how do we generate questions around what do we as students look for in our schools. In addition to that, there are some other highlights that I would just like to again reiterate is really geared towards promoting not only the intellectual abilities of our students, but our artistic abilities. And so again, we've had celebrations where there were students at Contos. Again, this was a fair where you're highlighting performances that were being completed and done on behalf of students, but also you're looking at other various art and media forms that were shared as well. The Dr. Martin Luther King Writing Contest, again, what a great way to showcase the intellectual ability of our students and the oration skills that they also have there. Food Justice Task Force, so being mindful of communities and knowing that there's opportunity to support where there's a need or potential food deserts. Also, opening up opportunities for the district to share with parents in the community around some of the 5-year strategic plans that we were looking at and holding community meetings. And so again, we're trying to make sure comprehensively that our departments really support overall that equity and that inclusion and lifting the voices of our stakeholders. And with that, I will pass it back to Dr. Ellis.
Thank you. Doing the real work. Chair seats. Additional information. At this time, I would like to provide additional information about the student-created.
I'm not sure if your mic is on.
Madam Chair, the mic is on. If you could maybe pull it or lean closer to it.
Oh, okay, thank you so much. Again, Chair Simpson and members of the committee, Patricia Ellis, Director of Equity, Access, and Inclusion. At this time, I would like to provide additional information about the Student-Created Equity Evaluation Tool. In June 2023, students identified 4 areas of focus for the Student-Created Equity Evaluation Tool. The areas were climate and culture, leadership opportunities and influence, instructional practices, strategies, and academic achievement. Students decided to use open-ended questions to collect data from their peers to get at the heart of what students were thinking, feeling, and experiencing. At each participating school, students identified questions specific to their school. to prepare students to engage in research to support their student-created evaluation tool, school-based question. Students and supporting staff members engaged in Research 101 that was taught by staff within the district's Department of Research, Assessment, and Data. The first two sessions were held virtually, and the last session was held in person. Each session was taught for 2 hours with engagement by students and staff. Session 1 was held virtually in November 2023 and focused on the following topics. What is research? Types of research, which was primarily focused on quantitative, qualitative, and mixed methods. Creating a research question aligned to one of the areas of focus and what makes a good research question, with a focus on what is gained by this research, who is impacted, who do you need to ask, and what do you need to ask. The final draft of their question was due in December 2023. Creating a data collection plan to answer the research question was also a part of Session 1. Session 2 was held virtually in December 2023 and focused on the following topics. Students had submitted their research question, and so there was further discussion around that particular question. But we also dived into ethics in research, in particular the Belmont report that talks about applications of principles used as a guide to consider risks and benefits, selection of participants, informed consent. Students also learned about the Institutional Review Board, or IRB, to protect the rights and welfare of human research subjects who participate in research activities. Students had an opportunity to learn more about the Tuskegee study that led up to the Belmont report because of how subjects were mistreated during that with the syphilis tests, unbeknownst to them. Conducting literature reviews, participating students and staffs were provided with a literature review template to engage in their literature review. They learned the importance of searching for relevant literature, evaluating sources in terms of sources being current, relative, also in terms of authority, accuracy, and purpose. Identifying themes, any debates around their questions that they may come across as a part of their literature review, gaps in the literature as a result of the research question that they identified, and outlining the structure of their literature review. Session 3 was held in person here at Central Services on February 2024 and provided students time to share their research question and method with their peers from the participating schools. In addition to research, assessment, and evaluation, staff providing support and guidance included representatives from Gender and Identity Inclusion, Black and Latino Male Achievement, Restorative Practices, PBIS, and graduate students in the Marquette capstone courses. They also attended and provided guidance. The Marquette capstone students also served as our external evaluators during this pilot year. Students presented their student-created equity research evaluation tool on Saturday, May 18th at the Equity Summit that was held here at Central Services from 9:30 a.m. until 11:30 a.m. The schools, I'm going to share with you 3 of the schools who participated, their research question, their findings, and recommendations. From Bradley Trade and Technical High School, in addition to the students who participated, one of the superintendents served as the lead, providing direct support to the students. Their research question was, how can teachers keep students engaged? Their findings included the fact that there is a big difference between doing just what you are told and actually being excited about learning something new. They went on to say when students are excited and interested, they are more likely to pay attention and really get into what they are learning. In addition, to make active learning work, teachers need to create a supportive environment where students feel comfortable trying new things and making mistakes and learning from those mistakes. This means encouraging questions, being patient, and giving students the freedom to explore. Also, to make work engaging, it is important for both teachers and students to work together. Teachers can try different strategies, and students can take responsibility for their own learning by asking questions and staying curious. Their last finding was that engagement can boost confidence and develop important skills such as problem solving and communication. Their recommendations, including asking follow-up questions to dive deeper into potential strategies, such as what activities or topics do students find most enjoyable? Does incorporating technology or multimedia into lessons enhance student engagement? Are there barriers blocking students from engaging in learning activities? Does sound have a big impact on student engagement? What are some tips for getting quieter or more reluctant students to engage? And does incorporating student real-work connections into the lesson improve students' engagement? Another school that participated was Project Stay. In addition to the students, the principal engaged, there was a paraprofessional who was engaged, restorative practices coach, and the school social worker. Their research questions centered on what is the power of restorative practices in fostering mental wellness and academic success. And so their findings included that restorative practices helps to create bonds with peers and fosters a sense of belonging, trust, and cooperation among students, that it improves behavior by promoting accountability and personal growth, and teaches one to reflect and take responsibility for one's actions. It focused on making positive relationships as something that would benefit everyone at some point in their life, whether it is a friend or a stranger. Restorative practices allows for deeper understanding, which can help to strengthen bonds. Their last finding, creating a supportive and inclusive learning environment, enables students to feel valued and heard, which means they are likely to engage in their education and ownership of their learning. Their primary recommendation was that restorative practices should be embraced as a step toward nurturing responsible and engaging leaders who are equipped to thrive both in and out of school. And then I'll just share with you the feedback from Reagan Preparatory High School. 3 students participated. The teacher who was a part of this was the mathematics teacher who also served as the climate equity liaison. And their research question was, how does career exposure and exploration at different times in high school affect the academic performance of students throughout their high school career? Their findings included future career goals and aspirations play a significant role in the amount of effort and motivation students have toward performing well in school. In schools where college and career exploration are valued and pushed, the overall performance of students is higher than at schools where they are not. Students who come from low-income backgrounds may be less likely to enroll in schools where educating students about career and post-secondary education have a priority. And students who are not taught about different careers during their early education are less likely to put effort into their academics because of what may seem to them like a lack of purpose. Their recommendation is to enhance career exposure in high school to improve academic performance and shape students' future career paths, and consider the influence of demographics in tailoring career exploration programs to address diverse students' needs. And with that, we come to a close of our presentation. If you have any questions, we'd be more than happy to respond to those questions. Thank you.
Thank you. So very much to unpack. I'm just going to ask if it's possible to have each of these groups have a standalone presentation for SASIs, like PBIS, restorative practices, gender identity and inclusion, Black and Latino male achievement, even the Success Center, that we just have them on an item on SASI, just because there is so much depth to each of those groups, you know, to kind of give them more time to present and share information about their work.
Madam Chair, I believe we can collaborate with the administration to work on that going forward. Are you talking like once per month have a different group in?
Yeah,
To
yes.
do something a little more expanded?
Yes, exactly. And then, in addition, with the student, these student survey questions, if there could be a meeting devoted to just that, because the students had wonderful recommendations. I know we'll ask questions now about it, but it would just be really nice to have that as an item to really focus on. Okay. Sorry, thank you. Do committee members wish to make comments or ask questions? Director Gokul Gandhi.
I want to start by thanking the individual departments and the work that you're doing, but I think that this report left much to be desired. And aside from listing numbers, there is data, you know, that we need to be discussing. And so I got an email from a constituent, and I'm just going to read it because I think they really identified what this report should be saying, right? So we got all this information. So the students were enrolled in, participated in, benefited from, and attended programs, and we did not see any data that identifies how students were impacted by the events. How was growth measured? How were the participating schools or students selected? Slide 9 states that 130 students completed surveys that contributed to an equity evaluation tool. What did those surveys reveal? How will the results of this survey impact change? And this constituent states that this report seems like another piece of fluff that amounts to nothing more than presenters patting each other on the back rather than doing the real and difficult work that creates change. And while I want to celebrate the work that everybody does, I really appreciate what you're doing. I would agree, because what we just saw was like an hour of reading from a PowerPoint that told me nothing but how many students were doing things. It didn't tell me what was the change between when the student started your Girls of Color program to when they ended. Did it impact their test scores? Did it impact their attendance? And I see you nodding, so I think you probably agree with me. The other thing that this constituent wrote is, where's the mention of the equity guidebook, and where is their report on the ongoing work of courageous conversations about race? Where is there evidence of student recommendations? And where are the budget lines that support the important work of creating equity for students in the district? And I really believe, I am going to ask for this to come back over and over again until we really can understand we're doing great work. It's not that the work isn't happening, but I think what's getting lost is how is that work really showing up with our kids? Who are we serving? And more importantly, who aren't we serving? Are there children in our district that really need these resources that we're not getting to? And how do we have a plan to reach those students? So again, I'm going to say, I think there was a lot left to be desired. I think a missed opportunity was having the kids come and present on their own student present. I mean, like you did this whole research project, and then the last part of that capstone is presenting in front of people to get that opportunity. That's what they do at university. You go and you present to a panel of professors to get that time to do your presentation, practice your public speaking skills, in front of people you don't know who could be intimidating. And so, I've said this before, I'm really tired of the way we have presentations at these board meetings. They are boring, they are uninformative, and frankly, sometimes I walk away being like, I am more confused than when I read the PowerPoint in the agenda attachment. And so I am really asking that for our meetings moving forward, we are thinking really critically about what do the slides say and why are we putting it on a slide? What is the gain for the listening audience? I am just kind of reaching my wit's end with the way we do presentations in our committees.
Thank you. Administration, any response?
Chair Simpson, members of the committee, we have heard what you said, and we will look forward to adjusting some of the presentations and providing some of those data points that you want.
Thank you very much. Director O'Halloran.
Thank you. So in reference to the Administrative Policy 1.06, so it says, they list under 4, there's, individual equity goals that are assigned. And then it says in June, you'll provide a report that provides the extent of fulfilling the progress to each goal. And so I know I can follow some of the, the evidence that you provided tonight backing up. So like one of the goals is district-wide culture of reflection and awareness and data and research-based decision-making. Like obviously you provided a really in-depth piece of evidence around how the high schoolers were, approaching these questions and learning strategies around research. So what I would hope, though, is that we can bring this back in fall and have specific goals that are assigned to each of these and then just report on those goals at the end. Because it does, because there's so much work, sometimes it feels like we just present all of it. And then this would just help us more, isolate the specific progress, I guess I would say. And I know it's in here that it's in June that the updates are. If we do want the high schoolers or any of the students to come to provide their direct feedback or their direct presentation, we might have to move that up in the calendar because some of them are just enjoying life right now. God bless them, they deserve it, right? So I guess, and Director Gokul Gandhi asked some of my questions. We did provide this feedback, and so hopefully we can provide a different style of reporting in the new school year. So, but thank you for your work, and I look forward to seeing the updates in the next school year.
Secretary Quala, do we have some things to clarify?
As far as
Just wondering in terms of, thank you, in terms of
moving the report up.
Moving the report, I believe you said you wanted this brought back in the fall with some specific goals.
Yeah, so if we could take, I don't know, that has to be September, but, if the team can just take some time over the summer and just say, okay, we're gonna say, this is how we're going to measure that we are cultivating a district-wide culture of data and research-based decision-making. It's gonna be 7 events, or it's gonna be whatever, and then we can just provide that evidence at the end of the year. That would be demonstrating the progress rather than showing all of the work, which I do appreciate. Does that make sense, Director Simpson? I don't have a time-bound request. If it comes in September, if you have to do it in October, that's fine. But that way we know upfront what it is, and then.
Yeah, why don't we aim for October? That sound good? Yes, So, yes, we're thinking October because we're going to try to focus on a big reading discussion in September with Act 20 and some implications. So October would be good. All right. Okay, I think that's it for board questions at this time. We do have some public comments. Madam Secretary, is there anyone on the virtual platform?
Madam Chair, we did have one individual registered who's not yet on the platform, so perhaps we could go to the audience
All right.
speakers and then check again.
All right, we will do that. Lucas Ware, if you would come to the podium. Sorry, it's just.
Point of information to the chair before Lucas gets started, since it's only a small number of people in here, have an additional 30 seconds on their time.
Absolutely. You're welcome.
I was actually going to request that, thank you.
Yep.
Lucas Weir, W-I-E-R-E-R, Acting Superintendent Galvan, Chair Seamson, Directors of the Committee. I want to start by saying that I greatly respect the work being done. Much of it needs expansion, and I do not want to take away from those successes with my comments. Having said that, MPS has a lot of work to do. In 2009, former Principal MPS Board Director and eventual Board President Larry Miller said, MPS has created 2 districts. One district offers schools that selects who can get in, and one takes everyone who applies. At the high school level, the inequities created by the system are particularly stark. In MPS, there is a select criteria enrollment system that uses attendance, report cards, and standardized test scores to determine readiness for certain high school programs. These 5 select criteria schools are Reagan IB, Golda Gifted and Talented, King IB, Milwaukee High School of the Arts, and the school I teach at Riverside University High School. In addition, Milwaukee School of Languages restricts enrollment through language proficiency criteria. Not surprisingly, these 6 schools are often most in demand and among the highest rated in Milwaukee on state report cards. 2 indicators on the 2022-23 state report card tell an important story, and those are chronic absenteeism and graduation rate. At the select criteria high schools plus MSL, graduation rates are Reagan 98%, Golden 96%, King 93%, MHSA 91%, MSL 87%, and Riverside 84%. While at non-select schools, most had a graduation rate between 50% and 2/3. Chronic absenteeism refers to students with more than 10% absences, and that no doubt contributes to the aforementioned disparities in graduation rate. At the select criteria high schools, Reagan has a 17% chronic absenteeism, Golda 18%, MSL 23%, King 25%, MHSA and Riverside 44%. While at non-select schools, chronic absenteeism rates range between 65 and 75%, approaching 80% at some schools. To quote Ta-Nehisi Coates, this is a difference of kind, not degree. It should surprise no one that our select criteria high schools are significantly more likely to serve white students and fewer black students than our non-select high schools. They serve fewer students whose families are economically disadvantaged and fewer students with special needs. These schools also have higher percentages of open enrollment, meaning more students from outside the city of Milwaukee. My question is then, with the given definition of equity and equity lens, what is the district doing to support our non-select criteria schools that serve greater percentages of marginalized students, especially those with multiple marginalized identities? What do we think our students who would, from these 4 schools would have to say if presented with this data? Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Angela Harris.
Angela Harris, Harris, Chair of the Black Educators Caucus, 2nd grade teacher at Milwaukee Academy of Chinese Language, and proud MPS parent. I too do not want to disregard the work that I saw presented here today. It is beautiful and impactful, and if I could give y'all millions of dollars to continue this work, I would. This is more about our commitment to equity work. The students in our district who experience racism on a regular basis can't wait for our district to move at their own pace and comfort level when it comes to equity work. If district administration and the board were actually committed to racial equity, those educators, the folks you see here The folks that you don't see here tonight who are resistant to anti-racist measures will feel uneasy, isolated on the outskirts. Those educators who've invested the least work in racial equity would wonder where they belong. Instead, we are faced with the opposite. Those of us who embrace anti-racist measures and demand racial equity feel uneasy, isolated, and cast to the margins by the board, district administration, and the MTEA. We are called divisive, troublemakers, and privatizers. Personally, I am labeled often as militant and angry for telling racial equity truth. This narrative is a failure of equity leadership by this board and district administration. What we have instead is the most empathic racial equity advocates feeling silenced and less central to the institutional culture than our equity-resistant colleagues of the MTEA. If we are using an equity lens to view that treatment, then what we review, then what we see is a sick institution perpetuating systemic inequities. After viewing this presentation, you must all ask yourselves if your commitment to equity is real. Why are departments with clear equity goals and outcomes facing cuts to their work? Ask yourself, are you driven by an authentic desire for racial equity, or are you content with rearranging inequities amongst various departmental highlights and strategies for support? At this point, the district administration and the board are all equity illiterate, and if you are all illiterate, how can you create a racially equitable, just system? Equity requires direct confrontation with racial inequities. How has the district's equity work to this point demonstrated this? Equity work requires redistribution of resources and funding, not a one-size-fits-all allocation of funding and resources. But the only way to redistribute access and opportunities is to prioritize the interest of our Black and brown students. How has the district's equity work to this point demonstrated this? Finally, effective equity efforts focus not on fixing our Black and brown students, but on eliminating racist conditions and systems. How does the district's equity work to this point reflect that? I think the ultimate question really is, do you all have the will to do this work? Equity work is a commitment. Equity work is difficult and disruptive and causes discomfort. What we see in this presentation is a failure to align actions with policy. To strengthen our equity efforts moving forward, we need to follow and adhere to Administrative Policy 1.06, Equity in MPS, which states, thank you, Director O'Halloran, that there should be a plan with benchmarks and a full report, thank you, Director Gokul Gandhi, made annually. It also states that there must be an equity guidebook. We have been waiting for that guidebook since 2019. Let's commit to doing the real work today, you all.
Thank you. The next speaker is Sierra Brown.
Director Simpson, members of the board, my name is Sierra Brown, B-R-O-W-N. Thank you for the presentation today. I guess it just left me wondering why funding is not a part of the annual equity report, or why the budget wasn't included in this conversation. Why is the budget not viewed and presented through a lens of equity? This is my first time looking at any kind of budget of any size, or certainly this size, and I didn't really know where to start. But I came to the board saying I was very concerned that we didn't really have the percentage of change from one school year funding to the next. So I spent some hours to put in and paint that picture for myself, I guess, for anybody who wanted to check it out. I guess I can share a little bit here. So Barack Obama School of Career and Technology did lose a significant amount of students in the last year, is 94.5% Black and student population, and lost a 1% of their total budget in the proposed budget you just approved. This they lost 2.4% of their salary and 31% of the supplies cost, whatever that is. So we have Keefe Avenue School lost 6.8% of the student population. They lost 14.3% of their salary in this budget that you just approved. Only 5.1% of supplies decrease for Keefe Avenue School, with a total loss in budget of 10.72%. This school is 95.7% Black student population, with only the total projected cost of 23-24 for Keefe Avenue School. Their budget was really small anyway, $2.68 million. So, and I'd just like to look at Milwaukee Academy of Chinese Language, lost 1% of their student population, a 0.7% cut in their salaries, with an overall 2.10% increase in their budget this year. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right. Madam Secretary, I don't have any other speaker slips, and then do we have the individual on the platform?
Madam Chair, yes, he's joined the platform, so we'll switch it over. The speaker is Mr. Larry Hoffman. If you could say your name, spell your last name, and then give your comments. Larry Hoffman.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Larry Hoffman, Hoffman, member of MICA Education Task Force. I hope the next administration does better than the outgoing administration in working for equity. Ladies and gentlemen, I viewed your PowerPoint that was available to the public as a whitewash. It checks off the boxes of what we've done, but it fails to analyze and determine whether any of it meant anything for the children of MPS. Now, I don't mean to deprecate the work of today's speakers, but the report fails to include any evaluation or evidence the activities listed have had any effect on equity among students in MPS. The report is entirely quantitative. Equity is largely qualitative. Yet I find few qualitative descriptions in the report or what we've been told tonight. Where is there any critique of anything the district has done? Its failures to create fully equitable systems or carry out any action in an equitable, to carry out any particular action in an equitable manner? Where does it say what we still need to do? More funding, more staff? I'm glad that Dr. Ellis has delved into some student findings. My question is, are you going to pay attention to them? Where are the suspension and expulsion statistics for May and June, and the full year statistics telling about our apparent progress and regress in equity of discipline? Where in the report is courageous conversations about race? Did that massive staff development project have nothing to do with equity? Have the concerns of the Equity Coalition been ignored again? Tonight's agenda calls for a report with possible action. Take action. Vote to reject the report. Send it back for a major makeover to fill in the blanks. Let the people in the departments contribute to it with qualitative data. Present us a real equity report in September or sooner. Thank you.
That was the last virtual speaker on the platform.
Thank you. Is there any further comment or questions from members of the board? Oh, go ahead, Director O'Halloran.
The courageous conversations about race generally comes at the PACE committee. So I think one of the other people who had sent in testimony or questions had asked that question, and I just wanted to address that normally comes at PACE. So that wasn't attached to this last week, this last committee, and we did address that. It should be coming in July, is my understanding.
Thank you. It's coming. Right. Director Leonard.
So I also started looking at the line items budget school by school. I don't look at the actual line items. I'm looking at it school by school to see, obviously there is a need to develop a different formula. And granted, I know it's a gargantuan task, but I don't know how to create equity without money. You have to have money to back it up. I also think that there are some other conditions that have to take place. I won't bring those all up here tonight, but I think that one of those challenges for us is to sit down with finance and actually start looking at how you measure what you need, dollars-wise, to make the changes in those buildings. And I'm looking right now directly just at the Act 20 and making sure we implement a very strong reading program in the kindergarten through third grade levels, because that would be a significant change in the results of what we expect from our students. It could make a very big difference. I've been in buildings where we've used programs that were very successful, and I've always worked in schools that were in the 53206 or highly impoverished areas. So I know that we can make a difference at our students if we have the staff and the resources to do it. But that does take a real commitment, and all I can promise you is I'll keep working on it, but I definitely will need help from people from finance to really do it the right way. Thank you.
Any other board members? Director Leonard, I'll ask you to join me on my quest to make a budget that is priority-based this coming year. Any additional comments from anyone from administration or the team? All right, thank you. So it looks like we have some things coming up with setting goals. I just want to make sure we have sort of a clear path, goals that are measurable or accountable, more time for each group to present next year, bringing back the equity guidebook, which I can't remember. I know it was in an email. I don't remember if it was also shared on the floor, but I know administration in an email response, if someone could remember that month, I know it was coming back.
Chair Simpson, members of the committee, Patricia Ellis, Director of Equity, Access, and Inclusion. The Equity Guidebook is online now, the June 2021 version of it. The 2024-2025 version of the Equity Guidebook should be available online in September.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, Madam Secretary, are there any other, or next item, please?
Madam Chair, that was the last item on tonight's agenda.
All right, there being no further business before the committee, this meeting is adjourned.